Joseph Marrone is a criminal defense attorney. He joins us now in Philadelphia. Mr. Marrone, thank you very much for being with us this hour. Of course, a dramatic sentence, 23 years out of a maximum of 25 years. Were you surprised by today's verdict, or 29 years, I should say?
Was I surprised? To a degree, if you want to kind of compare the types of crimes he was convicted for in this jurisdiction in New York City to what other defendants who have been convicted for the same crimes have gotten, this is completely excessive. But I think that we knew from the beginning, this judge was clearly not on his side, and there was a compelling outcry from the community when this Me Too era kind of took forefront in this case, and it kind of showed itself in the sentencing.
And Mr. Marrone, we know that in past cases, like with Roger Stone, of course, it's a very different case, but we see powerful people who are being handed down very severe sentences and then not entirely being held accountable for their actions. Do you see a scenario where Weinstein will ever see the light of day again?
Well, he's 67 years old. He's not in the best of health. He just received a 23-year sentence that he has to do a minimum of 5 on, and obviously go before the parole board. He has an open case in Los Angeles, California, which is my understanding is much more compelling. The evidence is even more significant, and the women are pretty believable from what I understand. So he has to deal with that case, and that ultimately is a separate case that would run consecutive. So he's got a long road ahead of him. The likelihood of him ever getting out of jail is probably slim. But his team seems dug in, and they're going to try to raise appeals. And there's some appealable issues that they're going to go after to see if they can get this case remanded for a new trial.
And one of the things his team, in fact, tried, Mr. Marrone, was asking the judge to recuse himself from the case. That didn't happen. What do you make of that request, and should he have?
Well, listen, anytime that the judge is not ruling in the favor of the defense, they're always going to look for reasons to try to get him off the bench. It's usually a stretch to do that. But there was a few issues in this case that, I mean, there was one juror specifically who admitted that she was in the middle of writing a book that involved, promiscuous activities such as this, involving sex crimes. They couldn't get that juror off the panel because they ran out of strikes. They attempted to get that juror off for cause. The judge denied that. Whether that's enough, we don't know. There's also a number of witnesses. Remember, there's only 2 victims here, but yet they had 2 additional witnesses called Marrone witnesses that weren't the actual victims in the case but got to testify, which only, when you get into these sex crimes and you have 1 victim, it's a difficult case for the prosecution. But when you have a situation where you have multiple women come in and kind of tell the same story over and over, it's hard for a jury not to believe that it's not true, right? Because you say, hey, look, it's too coincidental. And that's what happened here. I mean, there were 6 women that testified, and that's a big issue in the case, whether or not that was excessive, whether or not they should have been allowed to testify. And then the bigger question is, was the sentence itself excessive under the circumstances, and should it be remanded for a new sentence? All those things are going to come to light. I'm sure his attorneys are well-schooled to file these appeals, and we'll see what happens. But again, he still has a whole new case in Los Angeles, California that is a whole new big problem for him.
And of course, we're continuing to follow that story and the pending case you mentioned in L.A. and how that develops. It is, in fact, consensus that the case against him there is also very, very strong. Mr. Marrone, thank you very much for being with us this hour live in Philadelphia for more insight into this story.